And of course, I shouldn't forget my chief usher, sorry, best man, Peter Pinocchio Shabiter. A good friend to me for many years. We've been through a lot together over those years. He's in that sad libel business. Now, sadly, many of you will know Pete suffered a brain injury due to a three-way hovercraft pile-up a few weeks ago. And the doctors say he may never regain the ability to tell fact from fiction. He's on a clone to flights of fantasy, but I ask you all please to bear with him today. He's a dear friend of mine, and I wouldn't want him upset, so perhaps join him in his journey of make-believe. This leads me on to my beautiful bride, Kate. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me that she looks absolutely stunning today. I consider myself very lucky to have found someone like Kate. Someone who is beautiful, intelligent and funny. Naturally, she has sold herself very short in this marriage. Now, I don't think Kate ever believed that this day would finally arrive, but surely enough, her iPad wedding calendar countdown application reached 0. And many, many pulp gigs later, we're here today. Now, I'm sure, like many couples who are about to get married, we have to chat whether to say in the service, love, honour and obey. And we had many discussions, at sometimes heated discussions, but eventually she agreed that I didn't have to say it. Lastly, my thanks to our three wonderful bridesmaids, Charlotte, Kirsty and Katie. They looked radiant and have done a spot-on job helping our Kate today. And Kate and I have a gift for each of you.
Steve's got in there.
So, can I ask you all please to raise your glasses and join me in a toast to the bridesmaids.
Well, take a seat and let the make-believe begin. First of all, I understand there's a sweepstake going round about the cumulative length of the speeches. Well, I'll tell you now, there's only going to be one winner. There's only one winner, and it's my wife. As I'm going to sit down when she gives me the nod that her bet has come up. So, if I suddenly sit down, you'll know why. I'm rich, basically. One of the things that struck me about today was how keen Dave and Kate were to get married this morning. Dave arrived at the church for an hour and 40 minutes before the service started, and we stood outside in the rain, outside a locked church, twisting our umbrellas. And Kate arrived at the church a full 20 minutes before the church service started, and before most of the guests had got there. So it's endearing to see such a keen start to marriage. Let's hope that continues. Dave, thank you very much for your kind words about the bridesmaids. On behalf of the bridesmaids, thank you, and I know they wanted to thank Kate for giving them such an honour on your wedding day, so thank you very much for that. I think we would all agree here that Kate is looking absolutely stunning, radiant and beautiful. And I think we'd all agree that Dave is looking adequate. Honestly, when Dave asked me to be best man, I was quite surprised. I was surprised after the speech he gave at my wedding that you'd ever give me the opportunity for revenge. But here I am, so thank you very much. When Dave asked me to be the best man, he gave me a gift, and I brought that gift with me. It's called The Best Man. It's a measure of the confidence he had in me that he had to give me an instruction manual. This is a book that tells you all the do's and don'ts. It tells you how to be funny and charming and witty and how to not offend anyone. I haven't read it, Dave, I'll be honest. Now, I don't know if anyone else here, like me, struggled to think of a gift to give Dave and Kate. Now, I looked at your wedding list, And I must say, there was no Buffy or Doctor Who, so I wasn't actually sure it was your list at all. And at £40 a wedding a glass and £200 for a plate, I thought this can't be for me anyway, it must be the wrong list. So I thought, what can I give? I thought, I want to give Dave something he needs, but I can't wrap a bath. So what should I give him? And I thought, I know, having been married for 5 years, there's some certain pearls of wisdom and knowledge that I've picked up along the way. So I thought I'd write you a book, Dave, just to help you through the first few weeks, just for some knowledge. So this is a little book I've written. It's called A Simple Guide to Being the Perfect Husband. So that should help you through the first couple of weeks there, Dave. And before you ask, yes, that really is your wedding gift. Now, I asked Dave's advice about being a best man, as he'd been my best man, and he told me, don't offend anyone and get the bride's name right, which was good advice, but not worth the £50 consultation fee he then charged me. When he was at university, he said he wanted to grow up to a profession that was honest and noble, and we all wish him well in that regard. Now, in preparation for this speech, I racked my memory to tell you some stories. I wanted stories that featured Dave embarrassing himself, being clumsy or uncoordinated, and I realised that I had a problem. My speech was going to be 4 hours long. There were just so many stories. But let's start with my favourite. And no one questions Dave's intelligence. In fact, no one ever mentions it, really, do they? And there's good reason for that. Let's roll the clocks back to when Dave was a 17-year-old, and he was on his way back from McDonald's, where he'd worked a late shift. And it was the middle of the night, and he was walking down the road. And it was a long walk. I take it some people know this story or remember it. It was a long walk back to his home, so he thought, I know, I'll hitch for a lift. So as he was walking, he was hitching for a lift when a helpful motorist pulled over and beckoned him into the back seat. And Dave thought, fantastic. And he jumped into the back seat. And the driver wheel spun away at 90 miles an hour, swerving down the road all over the place. And Dave thought, great, I'll be home in no time. And then Dave noticed that a few things weren't right. The driver and the passenger were wearing gloves. It wasn't cold. The ignition barrel was hanging out by the wires, and there was flashing blue lights in the rear windscreen. And then Dave realised that he was actually in a police chase, and that technically he'd been kidnapped. And so the pursuit continued, with police cars diving out at junctions, spike strips being thrown, and eventually it came to an end when the driver took a wrong turn. And the driver and the passenger did the honourable thing and legged it, leaving Dave sat in the middle of the stolen vehicle, with police dogs barking around, and a loud hailer saying, come out with your hands up! And Dave thought to himself, well, I'm not going to come out with my hands up, that's what a criminal will do. I'll sit here, and when the officer approaches, I'll say, ah, good officer, I am but a victim of circumstance. As you can imagine, Dave was barely through his thought process before he was grabbed from the car, thrown in the van, handcuffed, and taken to the custody centre. He was dressed in the full child killer's paper suit and put in the cell. And to cut a long story short, after an interview the next day, they realised that he wasn't a criminal mastermind, he was just an idiot. I think this was the start of Dave's relationship with cars and driving. I won't say how many driving tests Dave took, or how many lessons he took, but there are certainly some instructors who've retired in their mid-30s on the back of having Dave as a pupil. They were so financially well off. Anyway, the day came when eventually he passed his test, and I remember it well. He drove down to Exeter in his newly acquired Volvo 480. And I don't know how many of us remember this Volvo, but it was a sight to behold. I think many of us do. We called it the car before its time, because despite being, I think it was a family heirloom, despite it being from about 1988, it had all the mod cons. It had electric wing mirrors, heated seats, it had pop-up headlights, although only one of them popped up, you had to go round and lift the other one up yourself. It was a sight to behold. Everything about it was perfect, with the exception of the engine, which didn't work at all, as I remember. Anyway, when Dave realised there was a problem with his car, it wouldn't start in the morning. Every morning he'd have to go down and jump start it or bump start it or hit it with a stick. And most people in this scenario would think, I'll take my car to the garage and I'll get a new starter motor fixed. Seems like a sensible thing to do. Not Dave. Dave thought, that's very expensive, that's an option I don't want, I'll join the RAC. So Dave spent his £29.99 joining the RAC, And every morning when his car wouldn't start, he would ring the RAC. That's right, yes, broken down outside my house again, yes, very unfortunate. And the RAC man would come and would jumpstart Dave's van. This went on for week after week, and it got to the point where Dave wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning before phoning the RAC. His alarm clock would go off, and the first thing he would do was phone the RAC. This carried on, and at the end of the year, when his membership was up for renewal, the RAC refused his membership renewal on the grounds that he'd used them too much. And so, not only is Dave the only person that's ever been accidentally kidnapped, I think he's the only person that's ever had their renewal refused by the RAC. There are many, many stories about Dave driving, and I won't tell them all because we'll be here forever, but the next one is one of my favourites, and I've called it Canal of Death. And I'm sure Dave and Steve, who were both in the car at the time, will remember this very well. We decided to go for a drive out to a country pub, which is the other side of the canal. And to cross the canal was quite a narrow bridge. And this is a bridge that could kind of swing at one end to allow the boats to pass through and then swing back at it again. Unfortunately, I guess me and Steve weren't available for driving duties, and so it came down to Dave. And me and Steve got in the car and we approached this bridge, and Dave very carefully drove onto this bridge, checking his left side, checking his right side, edging on halfway down the bridge, when we noticed that the other end of the bridge wasn't connected to the land on the other side, but was just pointing into the middle of the canal. And there were faces of terrified people all along the side, shouting and waving their arms, and people on a boat who thought that we were about to fall into the canal, which we were. And what Dave did next can only be described as panic. He threw it into reverse and put his foot down and crashed straight into the side of the bridge, and then reversed it 30 feet, scraping all down the side of his car. We eventually got off the bridge, and left on the bridge was strewn with wing mirrors and with side sill and side skirt. But Dave, unperturbed, just carried on as if it was part of just a normal motorist's life. He just went up, collected up armfuls of stuff, popped it in the boot, and then drove on. I couldn't believe it. But this really was a mark of the man who lacks coordination. I'll tell you the story of when I bought my first flat, and I was very, very proud. And the pièce de résistance was the beautiful thick pile beige carpet in the lounge. It was beautiful. I was very proud of it. And Dave came round on the first day and said, why don't we celebrate by ordering in some curry? So we ordered in a nice curry, and you know, it comes chicken tikka masala. And it was a bright orange hue like you would not believe, this tikka masala. And so we set about preparing it right over my lovely new carpet. And Dave started off with his rice. And most people, when they take rice out of the plastic little things, they either spoon it carefully, or they put the plate on top and then turn it over. There's some amount of consideration given. Dave just took the rice from about 3 feet above it and flicked it over, sent it flying everywhere. But he was very apologetic. He said, I'm so sorry, Pete, I'm so sorry. And he scuttled off, and he got a dustpan and brush, and he came back and carefully did it all up. And he sat down and he took hold of the red chicken tikka masala, and he raised it up and he muttered the immortal words, at least I didn't drop this one. And as he said that, the tikka masala slipped from his fingertips and flipped face down onto my beige carpet. And for the next 5 years I had a very oddly positioned rug. Only Dave knew why it was there. It was covering the stain. I could go on for longer, but I think the sweepstake, I think I've just won it, so... on a more sincere note, Dave, I have to say it's been a wonderful privilege to be your best man. There's no one more proud than me to stand up here and to do this. I'm very honoured that you asked me. You've been a fantastic friend, and I know you'll be a wonderful husband to Kate. And I think on behalf of all the wedding party, we'd like to thank everyone for coming. And really, if you'd like to raise your glasses, stand up and join me in a toast. To Mr. and Mrs. Richards. Mr. and Mrs.